Good evening, folks. Defeat in the Brandywell. Would we call it defeat, or is it an absolute whitewash? Are Derry excellent? Are we basic? To discuss tonight's match, we're going to bring in one of our mainstays this season, CC, and a cracking Adidas old school top, I might add as well, FEI. Kieran, what do we think of that? We kind of had a very, very brief chat before. We kind of mentioned Derry, being an excellent slick side, I think the way you put it. Have we really played into their hands by having a poor night at the office?
I would say that it is a very, very poor night at the office. That's just the best way to describe it. I personally thought when I saw the lineups, there was a couple of players that I was surprised to see the omissions of. I thought this game would have kind of suited Daniel Kelly a little bit. Derry City are a very high pressing side, so in order for us to get in behind, we would have needed that pace down the right, particularly with the fact that Rayhan Tulloch is now looks like he's going to be injured for a couple of weeks. It means that we are going to be relying on a little bit more pace. And I'm going to be, if I'm going to stick my neck out on this, I would have said that, even John Martin would have been an opportunity to, instead of him playing in that kind of front centre role, I would have had him more out as a winger. I think his influence on the side is much better when he is played on that. I know that Stephen O'Donnell did speak about game management and particular players that he wanted to ensure that the players such as Patrick Hoban, while he's a big game player, and that he has to, be kind of cognizant of the fact that there was 72 hours between the two games, and both games were very kind of high pressured scenarios. So the decisions tactically, I can understand where he was coming from, but maybe if Hoban had a little bit more time, and particularly when it was 1-0, there might have been a chance to put a greater influence on the game. But look, Derry were extremely good in terms of their pressing, in terms of them capitalising on individual mistakes. You only have to look at the second goal from Brandon Kavanagh. It was when he latched onto a John Martin clearance, but it was Yanis Eli-Coco who kind of was about to get the ball, and he was just out-muscled. And that's something that, would be, something that Stephen needs to recognise, that, we cannot afford to be out-muscled off the ball in those kind of areas. I thought Jordan McAniff's goal from a Brandon Kavanagh pass was excellent, but then again, he was given an awful lot of space out on the right. And then the third one, once again, Wazir Williams was just caught a little bit flat-footed, and Adam O'Reilly broke free of him, and Michael Duffy, the ghost of Christmas Bass, comes back, despite under pressure, was able to tap it past Shepherd. It's just those little individual mistakes, that little bit of just concentration, that at key moments of games that turned it on Derry's side. But that's the mark of a very good team. Like, I know it's very much a mark of a good side when you score late and you kind of win games late, and that's what Dundalk have done in recent weeks.
Yeah.
However, this team were just able to swat us apart. Like, I mean, I think James Rogers put it up, I might be wrong, that we registered one shot on target with some Keith Ward at the very end. Like, that's not good enough. No matter what you say, it's just not good enough.
Yeah, that's something that seems to have, especially in the first half of games, whatever been 90 minutes, in the first half of games in a lot this season, maybe up half a dozen, we haven't tested the keeper. We haven't even tested the opposition's woodwork. Never mind the keeper in the first half. Like, it's not like we didn't get the ball. I mean, we had a decent spell in the first half, and probably in the second where we would have had a decent bit of possession, but it just seemed to be very. Now, don't get me wrong, Derry are probably a little bit above us, but it just we never seemed to be able to do anything. Whether Alfie Lewis had some decent spells, but I mean, you can't, like, on the flip side, that you can't say that Derry, the 3-0 flattered Derry. It really didn't. I mean, they were excellent. Like, probably the quickest team I've seen in the counter-attack this season. And that used to be us. We used to have that kind of pace going forward, like you say, with Dickie Kelly or Ryan O'Kane when they were on it. But we just never seemed to utilise that little bit of, if you take, for instance, Mali had a little bit of a run in the second half where he kind of went through 2 or 3, but then there's just nothing's come at the end of it. We can talk about Cammy Elliott's miss, but...
Yeah. I also think for players like Yanis Ili-Coco, Wazir Williams, Hayden Muller, Conor Malley, like, let's be honest about it, this is their first season in senior football. Like, and they don't have the experienced players like Andy Boyle to kind of, to work alongside the likes of Wazir Williams. You've got Greg Sloggett and Robbie Benson who are out injured. Like, they can't work alongside these players. Like, I know I'm not trying to make massive excuses, but these players do need experience around them. And maybe it's because the fact that they just don't have that around them at the moment, that you can just see that little bit naivety. Now, Conor Malley and Hale and Muller and these lads, it might take a season for them to bed in, and we could see the benefits of it next year. But it's very difficult now at the moment, that for these players it must be very frustrating for them, because they are trying to put their authority on what the talent that they have as players, but they just need that little bit of experience around them in order to and whether we like it or not, whether they were playing at under 23 football last year, they did make senior appearances, but they were fleeting, or it's getting that kind of match day experience. And a game like Derry tonight, while it'll be difficult for them, they now know between that and the Rovers result that we had a couple of weeks ago, they now know what the standard is. They know that this isn't some walk in the park league. They know that there's an abundance of talent. And look, I think Derry are going to push Rovers the whole way this season. I really, really do. If they get their home, like tonight was their first confidence boosting home win of the year. Like, they've scraped results and things like that, but they haven't really been threatening and swatting teams away at home. They've been very good away from the Brandywell. There's still discussions whether that pitch helps them or not. I don't think it does. I don't think it's conducive for football for them. But in reality, Derry are going to really, really push Rovers right to the very end, and it could swing either way. But look how mad this league is. If we'd won tonight, we would have been pretty much on equal points, and maybe 2 to 3 behind Shamrock Rovers. Like, that just shows you how unpredictable this league has been this season. And St. Patrick's Athletic, who a couple of weeks ago couldn't, were getting poor results left, right and centre, are now in a position where they had to put Shamrock Rovers had to win on the virtue of a penalty from Richie Towell in order to get the win. Like, it just shows you that there is a much higher standard. And it's a bit like the championship over in England, where the bottom team can beat the top team one week. That's the way this is coming across now. So it's difficult to put your finger on it, but I think Dundalk must need to keep staying in touch with Bohs and Derry or even around that 3 to 4 position, and go for that kind of, how would you say, those European spots. But look, I would take where we are now compared to a couple of weeks ago, where we were in 7th. We were having very serious discussions over a lot of things. 4 wins on the bounce, and we look an awful lot better. But tonight we just were showing up as well. When you have a strength and depth in the squad, as Derry does, this is what you get.
Yeah, even when you mentioned there, the squad, we just had a comment in from Ryan Dillon. We've mentioned this before about Malley. He seems to be one of those players that, like I'd said there, he had a little bit of a run earlier on. He looks like he could world beater, and then would it be probably not harsh at this stage? It's not harsh to say he flatters to deceive. He looks like he could be a real potential, but has he warranted the minutes? I know we're under pressure in midfield with injuries and stuff, but it's like he's been played, and they're hoping to see what he produces in training out on the football field or something like that. You know what I mean? And it just never seems to happen for him. He just doesn't seem to be. I don't know what it is. For me, the best way to describe it, he just flatters to deceive. He seems to have all the tricks, like Ryan was saying, but he just, when it comes to the big games, when it comes to the crunch, he just doesn't seem to cut it at the minute. Like you said, now it is his first, it's his first season in senior football. So, but I mean, at games like this, you kind of want your technical ability players to really come to the fore, and the last couple of weeks he probably hasn't.
No, he hasn't. That's the long and short of it. And I think what actually needs to happen with him is that he actually needs to be dropped. That's just it. You think he needs to be dropped? He needs to be given a reset. Needs to maybe. But then again, we don't have the disposal of other players to come in.
Yeah.
And if it was a case that we were at full strength, you could give him a break, let him observe. Let's, give him an opportunity to watch a different perspective. And now I'm not saying get him to sit up in the stands. What I'm just saying is that given an opportunity to come into the game and influence it even more, maybe that's something that he might need. Like, he does have technical ability in abundance, but he has to. It comes down to experience once again. It comes down to when to use it, and when to use, like, not doing it for the sake of it. Do the simple things first, and then when get an opportunity, then to burst into that technical flair. But it's the knowledge and the ability and the intelligence to go ahead and when to do that. That go like. I think it's no mistake and no kind of heavy secret that I'm a huge fan of Robbie Benson, but Benson knows when to play the simple pass, and then Benson knows when to turn on the magic, so to speak. And that's something that maybe he needs to learn at this stage, and that'll come in time, and that will come with experience.
Yeah, I think like you'd just before, like, you know, I'll just mention straight away, as you can see by the comments, you know, on Twitter as well, is on fire at the minute. We definitely won't be doing a man of the match pizza. I'm not going to put Vinny through that and making someone a pizza for tonight. This is like a bite-sized podcast we're doing, so we're going to fly through it. But even just before we get into the goals, Paul had mentioned there, I know you quickly briefed over the lineup. You know, considering the finish to the game last Friday night. Is there an injury? Is there something, you know, maybe a fitness issue with Pat Hoban that he's not starting the game? Is it the pitch? Did they not fancy him? Maybe they wanted maybe a John Martin, that type of player, to kind of get stuck into Derry at the back. If it's not a fit Pat Hoban, it's a strange one that we see that we didn't start these lads. Now, I know, like, it's the last 10 minutes of a game that we really got going last Friday, but surely that momentum of those 10 minutes should warrant him starting the game tonight. It's a strange one, and Stevie's been guilty of this before. He's kind of made these strange decisions, and look, sometimes they work, but unfortunately, most of the time this season it hasn't worked. And I just don't know if that's just a kind of a coincidence on what the injuries are like and just the luck that they're having. But it was a really strange one tonight. Like, you've got Robbie McCourt comes back in tonight. You know, really strange, such a big game. And I get we're under pressure with signing. Like, you know, Tulloch's gone off injured. We don't know if he's going to be here for a number of weeks. Robbie's obviously brought in to cover the left because Leahy's played in. But they just seem to be really kind of, I don't know if they're rash decisions, but for Pat Hoban not to start, or, you know, like Paul had said, come on when the game's almost gone. There's some inconsistency there, isn't there? For if you want to go up to that next level.
I think when I was listening to Stephen's pre-match comments, he was speaking about, you know, game management or how to say player management. We do have to be aware that, you know, Patrick's on the other side of 30, so to speak. Yeah. And I don't want to be disrespectful to Pat in any way, shape or form. Everyone knows that I have a lot of time for him. But I do think that Stephen is probably acutely aware that that Patrick went off injured in a game which we thought was a kick in the calf, and he ended up out for pretty much most of the season. Stephen probably has to be aware that he has to rest players at certain things. It looked, I from a personal point of view, I would have been starting Hoban. That's just me. But then again, I'm not in the training. I'm not in the dressing room. He could have been, you know, carrying a knock from Friday. Might not have trained at all. We're not part of the kind of the inner circle, so to speak. But sometimes when you look at the lineups, particularly between these Friday and Monday games, you kind of question whether a bit of continuity might have been needed, or whether a bit of, you know, you're coming up against a side that realistically, you know, you're trying to match them pound for pound. You need your best players on the pitch, even put them on for 60, you know, and take them off then. If it's not working, then you've got the fresh legs of John Martin and Keith Ward and Ryan O'Kane and things like that, you know, kind of flip it on its other side. But then, you know, you pay the risk that does Pat or whoever it may be, maybe to be in a position where they're saying, you know, 2 very hard games on those pitches might not suit my body at the moment. So it's just something like it's not just Stephen O'Donnell making decisions. He has to listen to his management team, his medical staff, and the physios, whoever it may be, and they're going to be saying he hasn't recovered fully from Friday. He is carrying this, he's carrying that. So he might be forced his hand, and that's where it's at. But I personally, if I thought that Pat was ready and raring to go, I would have started him. But then That's why Stevens paid the big bucks.
That's it. I think we'd mentioned that, like, on a number of occasions. You make a good point about the pitches as well, and we said like a 70% fit Pat Hoban is better than most.
Yeah.
But like it's just so strange. Given that the games we've had over the last couple of weeks, and Pat has been out, and I don't know whether fitness he might be carrying. I don't know, but if we're talking about his actual fitness, I don't think that's in question. I think the man is just a natural. He's a natural athlete. But it just seems to be some of the not crazy decisions, but just such a big game. There was some really kind of I said it before. I said it probably 3 or 4 times on this podcast. Stephen Kenny used to make really strange substitutes. Not strange, but the timing of them were strange. So he'd make one like 79th, and then he'd make 2 in the 81st, and it was just disrupt the game. But now we have a situation where it almost looks like there's players, and we were guilty of this under Vinnie Perth late in the first Vinnie Perth era, and Filippo definitely, where you were almost putting on subs just for the sake, because you could make subs. And I don't know if we're getting to that stage yet, but it definitely feels like we're going down that road of let's just empty the bench because, we're really struggling for fitness. We're really struggling for players to be injured or not injured. So let's get minutes into the lads, when the game's already gone. It's just a really strange thing. Like Frank had said there, everybody's seen the second goal coming. We've got a 1903 gang up there with Orla Crowley and Frank Carroll. But, it seemed to be just a really kind of strange night again for tactical substitutions and kind of these brainwaves that just weren't really happening at all. And that's even before we get into how the goals were conceded. It's just really kind of got us on the back foot straight away.
Changes in football, like everything else, are supposed to influence the phase of the play that you're at that moment in time. And Pat Hoban, will influence a change. Keith Ward will. Dickie Kelly will. They're absolutely 3 kind of world-changing, game-changing players in terms of their influence. I would have been looking at them more at halftime. We were 1-0 down.
That's it. We're only 1-0 down at halftime. Yeah.
And then you would have seen like they would have been in the bed in the first part, but then you saw Derry City when they came out in the second half. They completely put us on the back foot. They were pressing almost immediately. It was just wave after wave of this kind of high press pace and attack. Like, you have to remember, there's no McElhenney, well, there is a McElhenney, but there's no Patrick McElhenney on this side. Michael Duffy is starting to get back into form. He looked absolutely incredible with his fits of bursts of pace. Like, but
Duffy looked as good as he's been. Yeah,
he's just as good as he's been because that's just the way he is. And like, the only thing that we can match for that was the likes of Daniel Kelly. And as I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, if we were in a situation in which there was a very high press and they played a very high back line, that was made for Dickie Kelly. That was made for Ryan O'Kane in the wings, or John Martin for that matter. So at halftime, there could have been those tactical switches. But, I mean, I know we're going to get into the goals and the defensive clearance from John Martin, but like Brandon Kavanagh, that goal was just worth the admittance fee alone. And sometimes you just can't stop those. But like, the build up to it could have been, and the same with Jordan McAniff given the space of the Brandywell behind the back four. It's these small little things that are just splitting you from the top teams from the not so top teams. And if we were going to look at the badge that I'm wearing tonight, it was that the best example of this was the Ireland-France match. We literally blinked for 5 seconds and Varane scored. The exact same thing is happening in these situations where there's just those little blips of misconcentration and you're being punished.
Yeah, I think Mark, if even like, you can almost, McAniff's goal after 16 minutes, it's one of those that he's gotten into acres of space from the head up that's put it into his path. But normally what would happen, he'd go across the box and he's just taking a fantastic shot that's beating Nathan Shepherd all ends up. But even if you don't talk about that goal, if we go straight into the Brandon Kavanagh one, for me, the most annoying and frustrating thing about that one was how much time and space he had on the ball. He was able to go left again, and then he found himself in the middle. Yeah, and found himself in the middle of 3. I think it might have been Muller, Williams, I could be wrong, but to find himself in like a trio, surrounded by a trio of Dundalk defenders at one stage, and be able to come away untouched, unmatched physicality, like one of the smallest men in the field. Nobody got near him, and not for the want of. It wasn't like he was too quick. It was just nobody seemed to want to go near him, and he's just taking a shot. Like I mentioned when Derry signed him, Brandywell was one of the best technically gifted footballers in the country. Like I didn't expect him to pull out that kind of goal, but that's just that was just typical though of the way the Dundalk have been. You got that game from Friday night. You go into the night's game, and we haven't even got to the last goal yet. But that kind of covering it's so naive and it's so lackluster and it's so just typical of what we've been doing all season, where we have these little bursts, and we didn't get them tonight. But when you concede goals like that, I've always said when you concede worldly goals, there's not a lot you can do about it. But when you give someone that kind of space, that's able to go left. He actually made two lefts. He went over in about 3 or 4 yards, cut back in and hit it, and it's criminal. It's absolutely for 3 boys to get like whatever with the shot on the goalkeeper's not a lot he can do, but for 3 lads to stand and watch him do that is absolutely criminal. Like you knew it was coming.
Yeah, but it was it's the same thing that happened on Friday night with Tunde Oluwabi's goal.
Yeah,
I mean it was defensive hesitancy. Is it mine? Is yours? There seems to be a miscommunication with the goal, and he just grabbed the opportunity. Whereas in this instance, like you said, I don't know whether they're communicating with each other. I don't know. I say you go, you get him, you press. You just don't know what's happening on the pitch at this very second. It's a lack of communication, but it's also a lack of understanding of what's required for that kind of level.
Yeah.
And Andy, that's why you're missing Andy Boyle, throwing everything, including his head at the ball, to make sure that it's stopped. And it's those little things but I also think when John Martin cleared that, the organisation that Andy Boyle would have brought to that back four in order to make sure that there would have been a complete push instead of standing off him. You're also kind of inviting the opportunity to come at them, and like that's something that is just really, really, it's so frustrating because you have a real abundance of talent, but they're all sitting out injured at the moment. It's like it's so frustrating because we were after getting a couple of very, very good results, and they were needed. They were confidence building. We really, really needed them. And it just feels now that's been completely unraveled by tonight, that it was kind of almost flattering to deceive. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, and the real annoying thing, just if you take if you take the game as a whole, the mad thing is, as disappointed, we haven't actually been really awful. It's just those little bit, like you had said earlier on, it's just those little bit of split second decisions that, it makes it sound like we were absolutely muck for 90 minutes, but we weren't. It's just those little bit of, against teams like Derry, you have to be clinical in every shape or form. And the difference was Derry, like I said to you just off air, Derry's probably the quickest team I've seen on the counter-attack in the last 2 or 3 seasons. They're as quick as Dundalk used to be under Stephen Kenny. And you have to be clinical against teams like that. I know lads have come in this season, and I get that they're playing their first, they're at their first season where they're playing proper games and, at that level. But it's that little naivety that magnifies these results. Like, 3-0 probably could have been 5. I mean, there really was chances there for Derry. That 1 or 2 passes Brandon Kavanagh didn't see. But it just seems to be,
We also have to praise Nathan Shepard for pulling off an absolutely unbelievable save in the first half from Michael Duffy, who we've seen him take those shots before for Dundalk, and they've nestled into the back of the net, and Nathan Shepard got his hand to it, and then he also stopped from Keane Kavanagh, if I'm not mistaken. He broke in, he point blank great save, and sometimes it's very frustrating. I say it's very frustrating for him because he's doing his job, and unfortunately sometimes it's just being undone by what's put in front of him. And
just to add misery to, I can't even add misery on top of misery.
Add insult to misery.
Insult to misery. It's misery to the insult for the misery. When we look at the third goal, I mean, I actually rewatched it just before it came on because I didn't realize how far O'Reilly ran with the ball.
Yeah, it's
frightening, isn't it? It really is. Like the only thing that's worse than that is if it happens in the first 2 or 3 minutes of a game. That it just that concentration. I get that you're tired, but for him to run that far and cut right across Williams. Like I had said to the boys in the chat, that's the moment where you want someone who's wearing that armband to take one for the team and absolutely nail him as he's coming across.
Yeah.
Like that's what, like you say, Andy Boyle would have done that, or definitely thought about it. You know, Brian Gartland in the day would have done it. Liam Burns from the bench when he played, he would have done it. And it just seemed, once he goes past, you knew what was happening. If he didn't take the shot on, he was always going to square it. Duffy, look at it's a bit of a toe poke in, it's a bit ragged at the end, but for him to be allowed to run right down across the sideline, to go round two lads, and don't get me wrong, he's quick, but Williams is fast, and he absolutely stripped him for pace, and he just stepped right across him. Like the minimum he was going to get was a foul, but there wasn't a hand laid on him. They didn't put a glove on him, and he just walked right in, and that's what I'm getting back to, these little well, Derry's been so clinical, and we're just kind of so lackluster, so kind of, I can't catch this. But if you can't catch him, take him down. I know it's 2-0 already, but let's try and get something. The last couple of minutes, you just never know, as we've seen last Friday. But that just really kind of typified the night where it was that little bit of concentration that we just didn't have. It was
it's very frustrating, and like there'll be a post-mortem within the team. No doubt tomorrow. I'm sure Stephen will have a chat with him this evening as well. But it's now when you play against Bohemians now on Monday or Friday night where you realize, well, are these lads going to learn from these mistakes? Because you're talking now, you're going to be playing the top 3 teams in the next five series of matches. Like, you can't afford, you now know that you can't afford to have those lapses in concentration, and you have to want it more. And that's just pretty much what it is. Look, this club have European ambitions. They'll always have European ambitions. It's where they are now. And I think Stephen O'Donnell is very much, we're constantly aware of that. So he knows that he's going to have to get big results against big teams if he wants to keep in touch with those positions, because as we mentioned on this podcast before, Bohemians are the club that has surprised absolutely everybody this season. With the loss of Keith Long last year, was just thought that they were going to be in a year of transition. No one expected them to be where they are, and now that they are, and that we now have kind of how would you say, something that's sideswiped us really for that third place position. And we're going to have to fight tooth and nail for it. Like even if it means, and I know this is a horrible thing to say, but even if it means we get in, we stay in 4th place and we get in via the emergency exits, it's the FAI Cup, all well for it. But we know that as a club, we progress when we are in Europe. And I think now that when Stephen O'Donnell is looking at whether it's July or next season, he now knows he would really, really now know the kind of caliber of player that he needs to bring in order to take this club to the next level. And
just that brings me, like I said, this is a kind of, we're doing Chris isn't here to run the show, so we're doing a bite-sized one for a Monday night. We're nice and short for everybody, because I know everybody's tired. But just when you say that caliber player, we spoke to James Rogers on Friday night, and we were talking about the fact that a certain Darrell Hogan, his contract is coming up at Wickham. Would that be someone? Obviously, everybody would be interested in the League of Ireland, but is that someone that Stevie could look at and go to the club and say, look, like you had just said, this caliber of player would he? But is it someone that could really kind of say, right, let's get the second half of the season underway? Is it a no-brainer that they have to at least attempt it?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, look. We have to remember a couple of, like, I know this is bite-sized. I'll try not to ramble. I like to ramble, but you know how I am. But like a couple of years ago, the opportunity came for Dundalk to explore the opportunity of signing Richie Towell when Pete Six were in charge. I mean, you do not sell yourself short. Look, Darrell Horgan, on the basis of his performances on the 2015 and 2016 seasons, were the reason why he got his move to Preston North End in the first place. He flourished under Stephen Kenny. Stephen O'Donnell, I would have no doubt, would love the kind of player that Darrell Horgan is, in terms of his personality, in terms of his technical ability, in terms of what he brings to a game. He's anybody's missing piece in a jigsaw. And even with his age, but he's played at a substantially high level in England. We're not going to be sitting here saying that some of the clubs that he's played for are below Dundalk or below Shamrock. Like they're higher, like in terms of their budgets, in terms of their training facility, everything. They're higher. So we have to look at it in that regard. He's played for big clubs and he's played at big teams. And why wouldn't you be ambitious? And if you're going to sit there and be the mark of a side that that the club want to show their ambition and want to show supporters their ambition, you have to go for a player like Daryl Horgan. It's as simple as that. I'm not aware of any circumstances in relation to him. I haven't heard a single thing. I know that there was a muted opportunity that maybe he could have came in at the beginning of the season. But look, let's be honest about it. He would change any game or any team with signing, and even his arrival would boost everybody around him. Like, I mean, you mean to tell me that like Daniel Kelly, John Martin, Wazir Williams, or any of those lads see Daryl Horgan coming out onto the pitch that you wouldn't be buoyed by that? Of course you would. It would be an unbelievable coup.
And I think even, like, I know Oriel, you know, we don't have a massive stadium, you know, like seats wise, but even filling seats, I think, you know, someone like Daryl Horgan coming back, you're talking probably an extra maybe 100, 200 seats a week, which is a lot of money to the League of Ireland team. So even from that point of view, for kids, you know, who would have probably just started, that era would have kickstarted a lot of kids supporting Dundalk. So to get a player back in like that would be a massive coup for the club, wouldn't it? Just on a commercial.
Huge, absolutely huge. But I think he's also the kind of player that I've said this in the school that I'm working in at the moment. Like, they, you know, the kids talk about, you know, Anthony Martial and all this kind of stuff, and I just alluded to two players. I said Daryl Horgan and Robbie Benson for completely different reasons, but the reasons why I gave with Daryl Horgan: he's not on social media, he goes into work, he's very subtle in his approach, and he's not flash in any way, shape, or form. He goes in and lets us talking on the pitch. He doesn't have to worry about anything, all the noise and everything that's going on around him. He's only concentrating on football. And you can see that the way that he is as a person and the way that he engages with the game, that all he cares about is playing football, and everything else just takes a back seat. And that's the reason why I think a lot of managers, particularly in England, have spoken so highly of him whenever he's arrived into a club, because he doesn't come with an ego, he doesn't come with any baggage. He just comes in, plays football, does his job. And look, you've spoken to him, I've spoken to him, a lot of Dundalk fans as well. Like, he's a cracking individual as well. There's no airs or graces about him, and that's what even makes him even more of a unique talent. Yeah,
and you're just interested just on Paul's comment there as well. Like, you're hoping that whatever happened with Conley at the time, you know, that they really see the potential in this. I mean, yes, I think Reggie was saying he's 30, 31. I mean, you're talking League of Ireland. So he's only a child. I mean, you get 3 or 4 years with that type of player, and he doesn't have to play in the wing either. He can play pretty much anywhere. So you're hoping to see the potential in it and what it could do and commerce from the club. So yeah, his wages, look, we don't know. We're hoping kind of that Dundalk, Paul, mightn't be as, you'd like to think maybe it mightn't be as high as another club might be, I would think, would it? Like we say, like if a Derry came looking, or a Rovers, God forbid.
Yeah. Look, we can't speculate how much he's on. We can't speculate what kind of wage structure that Dundalk have as well, and we can't even anticipate maybe there's money left over in the coffer, so to speak. Is it a case that a player is released, you know, one of the loanees goes back in July and Daryl comes in and that kind of frees up a slot? Maybe that's the situation they'd be looking for. Who knows? It's not for us to speculate whether a player is going to go in and demand A, B, and C. Particularly of Daryl's ilk, you know, that wouldn't be. I can't, you know, say that would be his motivation or whatever. But if Dundalk were to make an offer to him, obviously it's going to have to be competitive, because you are talking about two sides now in the league that financially have an awful lot of strength behind them. Derry obviously do, because their owner, it's no bones about it. But then we're looking at a situation where Shamrock Rovers also have banked European money from their Europa Conference League campaign. And the reason why this competition was brought in, because the likes of clubs like Shamrock Rovers can earn money through TV and revenue deals in a basis of being in a European group competition. So, that's what you're competing with in the league. And, it's obviously up to Sean, Andy, and Paul to make is it Paul? No, who's the third? Two guys. Pardon?
Alan Clark, Paul.
Clark.
Yeah. Well, another Sean is giving a great shout here. This could be something we could get going. The town end, we could do a town enders whip around and definitely get a direct there. We go Revolut, €2 every week, like you're paying for a 5-a-side pitch, and get them in every week and build it up. It's one of them. Like we didn't even just Sean another comment there. We didn't even mention Cam. Like it sums up Dundalk. Like Cammy Elliott comes on. Just to go back quickly on the game. The ball seems to fall again. We're talking if it falls to Pat Hoover, even to John Martin, it kind of skipped away from it, bobbled away, and he never. That first little touch it just seemed to take it away from him. But then there's still no excuse for how high that ball's still probably going. Like there's still no excuse for that to get in on that goal at that time of the game at that scoreline. And I just could really kind of emphasise it just wasn't going to be our night. It was an absolute shocker, wasn't it?
Ball and Sleevely and Donegal, I think. No. I say that in jest. I think it came to him. He wasn't expecting it. He bent far too back. It just summed up our night.
Yeah,
that's the best way. It just summed up our night. We were, you get those kind of little nuggets of opportunities, and we just couldn't. I feel for Cameron because he's after coming off like an absolute unbelievable moment on Friday night. There's been a lot of questions in relation to him of where he's come from and the kind of the standard in which he has come from, and that probably did not help matters at all. What's happened this evening, but look, he'll bounce back. But as you said, if Pat was there, John Martin was there, Keith Ward was there, it could have been a different story. Or we could be saying a player of Wardy's, she should be putting it away. Why didn't he do that? So you just don't know the ball, the bounce, the pitch, leaning back. You just don't know, but it just doesn't look good. It really doesn't.
I think the main thing to take from the show and the comments, and I've seen tweets as well, is that it's just one of those nights. Write it off. Get past it. It's a Monday. It's a bad start of the week for anybody coming home. If we were giving away pizzas, it'd be everybody that went to the match. But just write it off and look forward to Friday. It's Bows is a massive game. It was going to be big anyway, but now it's huge. Now it's a massive game. Devine's team, like we'd spoke about, you'd mentioned earlier on, they've surprised everybody. And it's at the stage where if you can turn them over, then you might get a bit of momentum, or it could be a bit of a scalp now turning them over the way they're playing. So, it's all eyes on Oriel Park on Friday night. I think the probably just to put this one to bed. The boys won't put it to bed till probably Thursday night. But I mean, get it out of their minds, get it out of their heads, and I think it's just go for Friday night, isn't it? That's all they can think about now.
Oh, absolutely. Declan Devine was in Derry this evening, so
right.
Look, he'll be well aware of, so to speak, he'll be well aware of what, but as I say, both sides of what Dundalk can do. Look, he has very, very talented players at his disposal. Dylan Conley's come back from England and he just looks like a completely different player altogether. We are all very much aware of the prowess of Jordan Flores and what his ability is. But I think he's flourishing under the likes of Declan Devine because, Decky is one of those managers that apparently, you walk away from him and you feel 20 foot tall because of the way he speaks and the way he motivates you. So look, it's going to account for a lot of things, how they recover from today, both physically and mentally, how the team is set up for Friday night, team selection, but also they have to take lessons learned from their performance against them up in Dailyman Park earlier this year. They have to focus and look back and see what they did right and what they did wrong in that game and take it from there. That's simply you reflect on what's gone wrong and you hope we need to rectify it to make it right.
That's it. That's all they can do, really. That's it.
Yeah.
I think that sums it up. And just write it off, go again, and all eyes on Oriel Park on Friday night. Kieran, look, it's been a pleasure. I know you're up early in the morning. It is a Monday night. Thanks to our sponsors.
School night.
Thanks to our sponsors, Dundalk Village, Playoff at Tony's Pizzeria as well. Thanks for the comments. We've a good few people on tonight. I know there's some probably traveling home from Derry, but we'll do a little bite-sized podcast tonight, and then we can come back to this one on Friday night with a bigger show. So, Kieran, really, really appreciate it, and come on to town.